I'm Amanda Fancy. I'm the dealer owner of Gals Home Hardware and Furniture. We've been at this location for about a year. We started in 1848, way back when. This is our 5th location, so we've never have left the town limits. So when we're looking to build this location, we had lots of opportunity to potentially look at outside of the town limits, but it was really key for us to be and continue to be a growing business in Bridgewater. Bridgewater, Nova Scotia is unique. We have a beautiful countryside. Our town is 7,500 people, but then, our customer reach is about 45,000. So, we're talking about lots of small communities, hidden treasures. There's huge opportunity here, and I think that it's certainly worthwhile to make the visit, make the call, do some inquiring, because it certainly is somewhere where I think there would be some strong investment opportunities for sure.
My name is Joey Richard. I come from Quebec, Montreal. I've studied opera at the Montreal Conservatoire of Music, so this is where I've learned about Italian, the language, and the food. And my passion just became bigger and bigger for food. I've been cooking for 20 years, almost. I opened a family business, but the only thing I forgot is that my family is still in Montreal, so I'm like, I'm trying. I make new friends. I'm building this thing, but it is a family business here. My chef is like my brother. His wife is like my sister. So I recreated a family environment. We do the real recipes, starting from the real ingredients, and for Italian food, what the secret is. Few ingredients and very fresh. So each recipe would be like 3-4 ingredients maximum. But it's just the best ingredients and makes it so delicious. If you think that it's impossible to have your own business, I'm the living proof that it is possible. People want us to thrive. We work together. So everybody helps each other. If you want to be part of a community, it is the community to be part of.
My name is Joel Holland. I'm the owner and operator of 902 Athletics. I found the opportunity, started this gym in my parents' garage, and now we are currently in an 8,600 square foot facility. A lot of people come here because of the community. The things that we offer here are different than a normal gym. It's an open atmosphere where you come in, the music's played over the loudspeakers, not in your ears. You don't put earbuds in and just walk around from one machine to the other. You focus on yourself, but at the same time you get to meet new people. We have 3 floors, which we do CrossFit, boot camps, athletic training, and personal training. We have so many other businesses that are growing our economy and feeding into it becoming more populated, a place where people actually stay as opposed to leave. We're growing, we're getting bigger, and a lot of people are on the same push to become a better Bridgewater. I love this place. It's my home, and there is no other place that I would want my business to be.
I'm Amanda Fancy. I'm the dealer owner of Gauss Home Hardware and Furniture. We've been at this location for about a year. We started in 1848, way back when. This is our 5th location, so we've never have left the town limits. So when we're looking to build this location, we had lots of opportunity to potentially look at outside of the town limits, but it was really key for us to be and continue to be a growing business in Bridgewater. Bridgewater, Nova Scotia is unique. We have a beautiful countryside. Our town is 7,500 people, but then, our customer reach is about 45,000. So, we're talking about lots of small communities, hidden treasures. There's huge opportunity here, and I think that it's certainly worthwhile to make the visit, make the call, do some inquiring, because it certainly is somewhere where I think there would be some strong investment opportunities for sure.
My name is Joey Richard. I come from Quebec, Montreal. I've studied opera at the Montreal Conservatoire of Music, so this is where I've learned about Italian, the language, and the food. And my passion just became bigger and bigger for food. I've been cooking for 20 years, almost. I opened a family business, but the only thing I forgot is that my family is still in Montreal, so I'm like, I'm trying. I make new friends. I'm building this thing, but it is a family business here. My chef is like my brother. His wife is like my sister. So I recreated a family environment. We do the real recipes, starting from the real ingredients, and for Italian food, what the secret is. Few ingredients and very fresh. So each recipe would be like 3-4 ingredients maximum. But it's just the best ingredients and makes it so delicious. If you think that it's impossible to have your own business, I'm the living proof that it is possible. People want us to thrive. We work together. So everybody helps each other. If you want to be part of a community, it is the community to be part of.
My name is Joel Holland. I'm the owner and operator of Manitou Athletics. I found the opportunity, started this gym in my parents' garage, and now we are currently in an 8,600 square foot facility. A lot of people come here because of the community. The things that we offer here are different than a normal gym. It's an open atmosphere where you come in, the music's played over the loudspeakers, not in your ears. You don't put earbuds in and just walk around from one machine to the other. You focus on yourself, but at the same time you get to meet new people. We have 3 floors, which we do CrossFit, boot camps, athletic training, and personal training. We have so many other businesses that are growing our economy and feeding into it becoming more populated, a place where people actually stay as opposed to leave. We're growing, we're getting bigger, and a lot of people are on the same push to become a better Bridgewater. I love this place. It's my home, and there is no other place that I would want my business to be.
Good evening. Welcome everybody to this special meeting, budget meeting for Monday, March the 20th. I'd like to acknowledge that the town of Bridgewater is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Just before we start, I'd like to announce that Mayor Mitchell is currently away with the International Michelin Cities Network as a committee member. And he is currently in France, busy with some meetings there. So we look forward to hearing from Mayor Mitchell upon his return. First off, I'll call this meeting to order, which I should have done already, sorry. And first of all, we have the agenda as presented to you, and I'll look forward to a motion for any additions or changes to the agenda as circulated.
Motion approved.
Motion to approve by Councillor Tanner, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Colwell, thank you. All those in favor? Motion approved, thank you. I'll just turn it over to announcements from any councillors at this time. Yes, Councillor Thorburn.
Very important announcement. The Legion, on beware to many people, does income tax returns for low-income earners. And we have a number of people that's trained, and there's no charge. You don't have to be a member of Legion. As a matter of fact, you don't have to be a resident of the town of Bridgewater. As long as you're qualified, they will do it. And I think last year we done over 450 returns. So it's a help to the community. And the office hours, or the times they're open, is Monday to Thursdays, 11 to 4. And you can drop your material off there and come back and pick it up. Somebody will call you, or if you have time, you can wait and pick it up while you're there. So I think it's important that the public know that service is available, and there's no charge to our residents. So that's it.
Great, thank you. Any other councillors for announcements, updates? I'd like to share one that you may already be aware of, but it's nice to share some great news that the announcement last week here in Bridgewater at our Michelin plant when we had the visiting Prime Minister Trudeau and our Premier Houston were here visiting, the announcement of over $300 million investment here for 3 Nova Scotia plants, Michelin plants, with over $140 million to the Bridgewater plant for the large expansion. With over 70 new jobs and with the planning of tire making for the electrical vehicles, it makes the plant facility secure and sustainable for the future for many more years to come. It's a great example of all 3 governments working together for the betterment of the greater community. Also would like to just remind the public, council will be having a Talk Bridgewater, where you can come out and ask your questions, talk about budget, whatever's on your mind. That being next Tuesday, March 28th. We'll be at the South Shore Center from 12 to 4, and in the LC Galleria that evening, Tuesday, March 28th, from 6 to 8. So please feel free to come out and ask your questions. As well, just to advise the public of a public participation meeting regarding the South Shore Center. This will take place on Wednesday, March 29th at the Community College. So we've changed the venue on that, thinking that there may be some more participants. Okay. So moving along, I don't see anybody here for delegations this evening. There's one item on the budget, so we'll move right to that. Sorry, one item being the budget. It's our draft capital and operating budgets, and so I'll turn it over to our CAO, Cindy. Heather, thank you.
All right. So good evening. Included with your agenda tonight, you have a draft dated March 20th of the operating and capital budget. Budget survey results that were a survey that was undertaken, and some feedback that council's received on that to help inform you when you're deliberating the budget. As the Deputy Mayor mentioned, there will also be Talk Bridgewater as an opportunity to get some feedback as well. The budget presentation is what we're going to be following on the screen tonight and primarily speaking to. It's included, as well as a 10-year rate outlook summary for council. There's a PDF that we'll reference as well during the presentation. So this year's operating budget is presented to you with a total of $28,466,157. That is a 9.8% increase over last year. The capital budget is proposed at $15.1 million, and that doesn't include carry forwards, which are also noted in your budget document as well, and I believe that has a value of roughly $18 million. It's being carried forward from previous capital works that haven't been completed, so a fairly large capital budget. The budget is shown with a tax rate of $1.75 per 100 for residential, $3.97 per $100 of assessment for commercial, and you have your LCLC special purpose tax at 6 cents. And with that, there's an operating deficit of $589,888. So essentially what that means is the budget as proposed with the existing rates results in a deficit. So there's going to be some slides and some discussion that council will want to have about options to address that. The wastewater rate is proposed to increase, and this is looking at, in terms of wastewater rate revenue overall, a 20% increase, but that's not 20% across the board for every category. So for residential, there will be a 6.1% increase to $517, and commercial will be $1,108, and that's how the budget is proposed. And the wastewater rate, there's a transition to move it to fully fund wastewater, and that includes both operating and capital, which is primarily reserve. It could be funding reserve, it can be funding debt, borrowing cost, or capital projects in general. And with the budget as prepared, all strategic priorities as identified by council are implemented. In terms of what the budget achieves, looking at some broad categories under community prosperity, this year you'll see $3.8 million in the capital budget, which is part of our $8.4 million commitment to the Exit 12A interchange, and all done to help facilitate the announcement that happened last week, as well as open lands north of the 103 for economic development purposes. There's a significant amount of investment in infrastructure to support the growth that the town is and will continue to experience. So wastewater projects total approximately $5.2 million. Road upgrades, there's $4.79 million. And that includes $600,000 for pavement management. And some of the roads that we'll see done under some of our more significant projects are High Street, St. Phillips, and then there's Pearl Street. Sidewalks, there's $175,000 proposed for sidewalk upgrades. The major one of that is the Glen Allen Drive sidewalk that will be on the opposite side of where the parking is on Glen Allen now for the hospital. Investment and traction strategy, we have funding for that. The Bridgewater Memorial Arena, redevelopment of that continues, and this year we'll see $275,000 in the capital budget, which will be allocated to continuing to work on the second floor renovations. If council remembers, this year we had some remediation issues that had to be addressed. And Energize Bridgewater continues with $1.86 million proposed for that. In terms of placemaking, we will continue with our accessibility action plan and coordinator. So the town's cost is $18,000, and that's a regional initiative with municipalities within Lunenburg County. The active transportation plan will continue to be implemented, so we'll be looking at some active transportation infrastructure. High Street trails, Guthrie will be planned. The Bridgewater Memorial Arena redevelopment plan, as I indicated. The open space plan will be implemented this year, or continue to be, so there's some park improvements proposed in the capital budget, some signage, some trail improvements, and then capital, there's $55,000 allocated to that, and the parks operating is $670,000, so it's part of the open space development. Affordable housing, we'll be looking at the development of an incentive program this year. And the tiny shelter grant is proposed to continue in the budget this year at $15,000. And again, Energize Bridgewater continues as a method of reducing energy poverty for our residents. The museum facility, this year you'll see $500,000 proposed in our capital budget. That includes proceeding with grant funding, and that's to look at some significant upgrades to that facility to address some of the facility condition. And there's an operating grant that the town provides, and that's in the amount of $211,000. The Lifestyle Center, we will be funding that with a grant of $625,000 this year. That's what's being proposed in the budget. Transit will continue to operate within this budget, of course, and our cost for that is noted at $322,000. There's funding for community events that will continue this year, so that looks at Music on the River Bank, there's Canada Day, there's Christmas on the Lehigh, that continues. Support for nonprofit organizations, so this year there's $59,000 proposed in grants, so there's your regular grant funding of $29,000, and then there's additional funding of $30,000 proposed, and some of that's for nonprofit organizations that were operational, and council asked us to look at options to provide funding for that, for some of their annual operating costs, and then there's the tiny shelter grant proposed. And then tax exemptions to nonprofit organizations total $108,000. Low-income property tax exemption is proposed to have a value of $50,000 this year, and I believe that's a slight increase from last year, which was $40,000. Pro Kids, there's funding in the budget for that at $16,000, and then there's a continued investment in emergency response. So fire services is 1.6, police protection net is 4.1 million, and then emergency response, which is REMO, is 25,000. Change that, there we go. And to finish off, placemaking and quality of life, we have a community navigator position proposed in the budget this year, and that council's already given pre-approval for that, so that will start in April. And we're looking at a regional collaboration with other municipalities in Lunenburg County to look at anti-racism, inclusion, and diversity committee and strategy and plan. So we have funding proposed for that. In terms of ensuring fiscal responsibility, we continue to contribute to reserves. So the wastewater reserves this year in total, that includes the reserve funding from your sewer rate as well as your betterment charges, is $927,000. Our grant coordinator will continue to source grants, and our budget is built based on our capital budget on having some projects contingent upon some of those grants being sourced. There's funding for asset management, for plan and program development of $135,000. Fraud risk assessment will be completed this fiscal year, and next fiscal year we'll look at implementation. There's funds for the continuation of the internal control audit on finance processes, so there'll be another process identified and an internal control audit continued on that. And council's looking at development and infrastructure charges to help look at how we can fund some of the infrastructure required to support growth. So there's $200,000 in the budget to have that developed this year. So that's to do a complete assessment of our infrastructure, identify what we need and what the gaps are, what the estimated cost is, and look at what charges would be appropriate to put in place to offset some of those costs as development occurs. And with organizational excellence, again, there's the internal control measures. And one item that we will be implementing this year, and has been something that we've been looking at for the last year and a bit, is in time and attendance, and that was something that came out of our internal control audit on our payroll function. Records management, we continue to work on that, and we have funds for scanning of files, and that's primarily the building inspection and fire inspection files, which will help support regional building inspection services. And then there's the establishment of a privacy management framework and program this year as well. So the operating budget summary is indicated. Our gross expenditures this year are $28,466,157. That's if you round it up, a 10% increase, or 9.8. Our revenue is increasing 5%, and that's based on the, the non-tax revenue. And then transfers from reserves are a decrease there of down to 5,000. Tax revenue is increasing 10%, so that would be based on the tax rate at 1.75, or $1.75 for every 100, and the 397 for commercial. And so that would be 23.3 million. So again, that leaves you with a deficit of $589,888. Within your budget document, and certainly as we go through the budget, you may want to refer back to that. So your budget document is arranged such that when you look at each section of town operations, so administration, finance, engineering, you'll see that there's a baseline, which is your preliminary baseline, so that's your core. If you did nothing new and you stripped everything down, that's took out all the one-offs from last year and just looked at your core service, that would be your preliminary. And then additions are what's new, and deletions are what we may have made changes to your baseline. And then you've got your proposed budget. So that's how the budget's organized. Council should be familiar with that because it's the way it's been organized for the past few years anyway. And that's kind of how we'll reference the budget as we go with you as we go through it. In terms of the deficit itself and having the $589,888 as a deficit, as indicated, there's some conversations that need to be had about what options we're going to look at to address that. Because the one thing we cannot do is have a deficit. We have to come in with a balanced budget. We're not allowed to budget with a deficit. So it have to be addressed, and that's why we'll get into looking at what some of those options are as we go forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim right now to kind of take you through the next bit of slides on just an overview of the budget, and some of how it's funded, revenue sources, those types of things.
Okay, great. So we're going to start off with a slide that's also included in the public budget document, and that's where do your tax dollars go? And so this kind of divides the pie up as to how it's spent. It gives you a little bit more of a visual than just the plain numbers themselves. So we look, primarily the big portions would be the police at 20.62% of the budget, engineering at 10.51%, and wastewater at 10.47% of the budget. And then we're going to talk about mandatory contributions in a bit, but that's 10.43%. So those particular areas, are the biggest percentages of the budget. And then there's some smaller amounts like capital reserve payments and things like that that are smaller in amount. But just gives you an idea of kind of the breakdown of the departments and what portion of the budget that is. The next pie, again, kind of similarly shows you the breakdown of revenue. So our sources of revenue for the town primarily is tax revenue. So 85% of the town's revenue comes from taxes. So that's the big part of the pie. The rest, sales of service, so that's things that we can sell. So tax certificates that we charge for, transit passes, selling plots in the cemetery, things like that we can actually sell. Another source is interest income, licensing, permits, like building permits and so on. So again, we charge fees for that, but it makes up a much smaller portion of our revenue options for the town. Mandatory contributions, so I referred to this on the slide on expenditures. So these are things that we cannot control the cost of, and it makes up over 10% of our budget. So things like corrections, regional housing, education, library, and assessment services. And basically, we're provided with the budget for those organizations. The education contribution is a calculation of our uniform assessment times an education rate, so we can project what that is. And that one alone, we're expecting a $173,000 increase in our contributions to the school board, just purely based on increasing assessed value. They do have the option to increase the education rate, but we haven't heard anything, and often it's well into the budget year before we actually are fully sure of that, but at this point in time, we're assuming the rate would stay the same. And so the overall of those things which we cannot control, it's a $189,000 increase in our expenses. The next thing, I just wanted to summarize kind of the baseline changes. So Tammy talked to you about, we have a baseline, then we have additions and deletions for level of service and special projects. So just looking only at what's changed in last year's baseline to this year's baseline. There's quite a number of things, but the largest being salaries. So CPI adjustments, step adjustments, and things like that that are not level of service changes, but that are, rates that are agreed to in collective agreements and so on, accounts for about $868,000. It's still an estimate. We're waiting for final CPI numbers to come out tomorrow, but that's our best guess at around 7% CPI adjustment right now. In addition to that, the net additional contribution for police services is about $132,000. The mandatory contributions, which we talked about, is an additional $189,000. Energize Bridgewater shows up here, so the increase in expenditures is $181,000. However, that program is fully funded, so there is offsetting revenue for that one. Energy, fuel, and insurance, I grouped together just to kind of give you an idea of how much just an increase in those things. So we're budgeting for about a 6% increase in Nova Scotia power costs and energy costs, 48% over last year's budget for fuel, because it was under budget after we thought we had budgeted well for that, but events that happened around the world impacted that. So based on our estimates, that's going up 48% over last year. And our insurer advises us 18 to 20% increase in insurance is possible. So, and we've had that experience for the past few years. So that those three costs together, kind of capturing them together, just to give you an idea of things that, again, we can't control. That's $236,000. The fire protection rate, just as a small explanation of that, that actually goes through our Public Service Commission for the water utility, and the UARB approves that based on the water rate study that was done for the PSC, and that's the amount the town pays for hydrants, basically. And so that's gone up $190,000 over last year's budget. And so there's various other things there. The LCLC operating grant has gone up. However, they had funds left over from capital projects in the past, so our capital grant to them has gone down. So the net is increase to them is very small, actually a slight decrease. And the paving. So we always tell you, capital budget has $400,000 of paving in, and there's another $200,000 operating. We decided to consolidate that, and you'll find all the paving of $600,000 in capital. So it does reduce the baseline, but it shows up on the other side in the capital budget. And so those are our most significant things to kind of talk about as shifts in the baseline. So if you had last year's budget open and this year's and looked at those baselines, those are going to be the big impacts. So again, just to this gives you an idea of we talked about the shift in the baseline, but this gives you an idea of the additions. So on the revenue side, for additions, nothing really large there, about $180,000. And those are just some small increases. My memory's gone, but 2 small increases. And then on the expenditure side, we have over $1.5 million of additions and about $500,000 of deletions going through. And those are the things staff from the different departments are here this evening, and they'll be explaining those additions and deletions to you. So I'm going to pass it back to Tammy, who's going to start with the administration department.
Okay. So that is on page 20, I believe, of your budget document, the additions and detail.
So I'll just add,
Page
if you have,
15,
sorry,
Is it 15?
yeah, on my document.
if you have questions, we'll field questions as we go through each department. So just letting counselors know if you have questions, just feel free to ask as we go along.
Green's talking about the slides.
Okay.
But the actual budget document, it is page 20 if you
Yeah.
wanted to look at the administration overall budget, not just
Yeah.
the additions and deletions on the slide.
Yeah.
Get both of them up here.
So I'm just going to highlight for you just quickly what's changed in the baseline. So there have been some changes there. So if you are looking at your budget document on page 20, you'll see that the adjusted baseline is a bit different than the 2022-23 budget. So some of the more significant changes there are under administration. So our legal services contract, which we've just awarded, has increased, and that also includes funds for some of our union matters that we're dealing with there. So there's some legal expenses associated with that, and just the increase in the legal services contract. With under employee management, there's been an increase there from 70,000 to 119, and the significant change there is that the Joint Services Board HR contract costs are noted there. So our HR costs are shown in that account, and they are proposing an additional position with the Joint Services Board. In that position, the town would fund that based on our percentages from last year, so our cost would go up for that. Under conventions, I believe it is, there is conventions and delegations, a slight increase, and that's just to recognize the cost of FCM and NSFM attendance by council. Economic development, the baseline has actually reduced, and that's just removing some of those projects that in terms of appraisal cost and market and promotion. And you'll see some of that added back in as additions. And under contingency, the contingency's been reduced down as well. So last year when we established the budget, there was a small surplus, and we put that surplus under contingency for some unknowns. So that's been removed completely given the budget that's been presented, and that's down to from 135,000 down to 35,000. So those are the changes that you'll see in the baseline. In terms of additions, and which is on the slide, we have sponsorships. So there's 40,000, and that's year 1 of 5 for the Brighter Day campaign. So council had referred that to budget with a commitment. It was 200,000, and there was a commitment over those 5 years.
Sorry, yes, Councillor.
So how did we arrive at that figure of doing it over 5 years, and how does it compare to other councils?
So that was a direction of council to phase it in over the 5 years, or propose it that way. I can't remember if that's how they had proposed it, that it could be done over 5 years, but that was a proposed phase-in of that. In terms of how does that compare to how other municipal units are funding that, I'd have to confirm. I know the District of Lunenburg has committed some funds, but I'm not sure how theirs is phased in, but we could find that out for you. Under is that good enough for now? Okay. All right. Under salaries and administration, there is some 192,000 there. So there are 2 positions proposed there. One you've already given pre-approval for, and one you haven't. I would note that we have also with the additions noted whether they're required or not. So yes means they are, no means nothing says you have to do it. It's being recommended, but there's nothing that says you have to do it. And if it's one time, so you're just going to see it this year and it's gone, or if it's going to carry over into every budget from this point on. So that's kind of how they're shown. So under that, we do have yes and no. Yes, because you've given pre-approval for the community navigator, and no, because the deputy CAO is a position that you've referred to budget deliberations. Salaries, asset management. So as I indicated, we have some funding for asset management. This year we started the asset management program with some funding from FCM. This would see that continue. So we'd be looking at hiring an asset management coordinator and then purchasing some software. That would, asset management software, that would allow us to manage the data associated with our assets and look at all those, the life cycle costing and all that. So that's 86,000 and 33,000. Nothing says you have to do that, but it is recommended. The software would be one time and the salary would be ongoing. And then the next few categories that you see on professional development, meeting pay, travel, cell phone, computer hardware, software, and small equipment are all related to those new positions. So if one of them doesn't happen, we pull out some of those costs, but those would be the costs to basically set up the office and then and provide the professional development, the meeting pay, the travel costs. So some are one time, because once we buy the desk, we're done. Some of them would be recurring. So if we go down to consulting, that's the next one that's not associated with those positions, and that is looking at 20,000 for recruitment and retention strategy. So something council identified during your strategic priority setting exercise is looking at how we can better recruit and retain positions. Employee wellness, it's proposed that we increase the rebate for employee wellness. So those are wellness initiatives that employees may undertake, whether they're physical or for mental wellness. Right now we provide a $75 annual rebate with receipts, and we're proposing to increase that to $150. Land sales, there's $25,000 proposed for that, and that's under economic development to enable some work to get done at Exit 12A in terms of having some appraisal work done, preparing for marketing of those properties as well. Marketing and promotion in general, this is the investment strategy and branding, so there's $20,000 for that. Consultant and advisory services, so this is $10,000 that would basically tag on to a regional BRE survey that was done. So the other units participated in it, and the town has the opportunity to participate in that too. So that would be a survey of businesses to essentially give you a BRE-like survey of businesses and some of their challenges and where they need assistance and help. Website development, council had asked that we look at providing funding for a complaint portal, and so that would provide the funds to do that. Under sundry, there's $4,000, and that's to increase the service awards. So those haven't been increased for some time, and those are the awards that we do when we recognize staff for years of service. So that would be a policy change that would come back to council, but it is providing the funds to enable that to occur. And there's been some things that have been taken out. So we bought some swag last year, and we're not doing that this year. There was expenses associated with the strategic planning workshop and council size review that have been pulled out because we're not doing that this year. We had budgeted for a student last year, and there's no student proposed this year, so we removed that from salaries. And accessibility, the amount of funding that's been requested has gone down by $5,000. So all in all, there's $460,000 of new additions and $26,000 of deletions.
Okay. Back to me. So if you were looking at the public budget document itself, the finance page is page 22, if you wanted to look at that, and also the additions and deletions are on the slide. So I'll just kind of go through the same as Tammy did. I'll kind of follow what's on page 22 in the budget so that we can talk about the baseline changes as well. So as Tammy talked about earlier, property taxes are assumed to be at the same rate as last year at $1.75 residential and $3.97 commercial. So given that, the baseline has increased $1.6 million due to that assessment growth alone. So that's 9.5% over last year. So you'll see that increase. There's a line called life center charges. That's actually the special purpose tax. And so that went from 463,000, and that baseline's gone up to 511,000, based on the 6 cents times the increase in assessment growth. So that's increased as well. And you'll notice also transfers from reserve. Last year, we had $330,000 coming into revenue, and that was, we had taken from reserves kind of to fund some one-time projects last year, and so that funding isn't showing there this year, just because those projects either were carried forward or completed. On the expenditure side, a couple of things there to note. And under taxation, so the expense goes from 155 to 172,000. And why that's increased is because by virtue of assessment growth, we have to increase our exemption for some specific nonprofit organizations, as well as we've put in an increase in the low income exemption of $10,000. So that's increased the baseline. That's not necessarily new level of service. On the insurance, we talked about that earlier. We're estimating a 18 to 20% increase in insurance, and that part of that is reflected under the finance budget, but it's also spread throughout all the departmental budgets. So that's under the general risk management. A new item this year is transfer to reserves. So the baseline was 0 last year, and it's 64,000 this year. What that is we're actually bringing in more revenue for the special purpose tax than we need to pay the debt and interest charges on that this year. So that will go into reserve to be applied to payments in another year, so that that can be paid off sooner. The Museum Commission, there's an increase in the baseline of $20,000 to kind of account for the fact that there's CPI increases and so on. But there's also an addition there of $43,000, and that relates to some remediation that'll probably be discussed when Patrick talks to you about the museum budget in particular. The general capital fund was 1.2 million last year, and it's just over 1.1 million this year, and that generally varies. So that's kind of we funded all the capital items however we can, and these are the items that might have a shorter useful life, so we can't borrow for it, or maybe it's staff time, things that you generally, like automobiles, we often don't go finance those with debt because they have such a short useful life. So those are capital things that are funded by operations out of the tax rate. Conditional transfers, we've talked about that earlier. That's mandatory contributions for which we have little control over. And so that kind of takes care of the baseline increases. There was also one other significant addition there, and they're all kind of in one, and that's $125,000. And what that is a number of special projects. Tammy referred to some of them in the overview, but that's budget software at $25,000. That's internal controls review, continuing the process that we've been looking at for a while of reviewing different functions in finance, one kind of function at a time, so there's $25,000 for that. In addition, there's funds for a new time and attendance system, which we've been working on, and that's basically a carryover from last year because we're still working on that project, and some funds to finish off the fraud risk assessment and any implementation changes that we have to make as a result of that. And so that gives us about $168,000 in additions for finance.
Just, Kim, what flexibility do we have with the special purpose tax to roll that added amount, so to speak, into a capital reserve for the facility going forward? Do we have that flexibility, or is it all the same?
We could have that flexibility. Right now, I kind of have it modeled out for the next however many years we need to collect that tax, and what that $64,000 would do is permit us to either reduce the 6-cent rate in the last year because we'll have the money saved up for that part of that final payment, so it might take time off the end, or council could choose to save that for something else.
All right, so fire is, if you go to your budget document, it's on page 26. The slide on the screen is part of the PowerPoint presentation that shows the additions and deletions. So I know that the chief is here and can kind of go over the additions for you. Essentially, the baseline is pretty much this similar as last year's, with a few small increases, a lot to do with just cost of living increases. The big increase is in the fire protection rates, as Kim has already gone over. And so that shows up under fire service, and that's the cost of hydrants, and that's gone from a projection of $869,518 to $978,510. So to say, the chief is here, and he can speak to the additions that we, which are highlighted on the slide projected on the screen.
I guess this is on, is it? The first addition is $7,942. That is under the Fire Force payment. That is for our second deputy chief that we implemented in our fire department. And the reason for that implementation is the ever-growing town that we are having. We're finding it very difficult to maintain what we've been doing. Both the deputy chief and myself have full-time jobs, and there's a lot more going on in our town now, so we put a second DC in place to help out with the everyday jobs that have to be done. For example, part of the purchasing, going to extra meetings, and fire calls on top of that as well. So that's what that is for. Under firefighting equipment, our budget is raised this year to $39,300. And I can go over the items that we've added onto it. One of the big items that has changed it is that we had in our budget last year $9,000 for headsets for our ladder truck, for better communication from the ladder truck to our members on top. We spent probably 9 months looking to find the equipment that we wanted, finally found it, and it's 20 weeks away. So we couldn't put it in our budget last year, so we had to move it forward to our other budget. So that was one of the big items that we had. Some other items that's there is our smoke machine that we used to have for training purposes has broken down, and the replacement of that would be somewhere in the range of $6,500. Some battery-powered screen lighting, scene lighting for the ladder truck. Some more replacement rope. Our rope is only good for so many years, and then it has to be replaced. It gets tested every year, but we're up to the point now that we have to replace some of that rope, and that's $4,500. As usual, we have to have some extra straps and quick release buckles for in the rescue truck for holding our equipment in place, so that when we're driving down the road, it's not going all over the place and injuring our members. The folding platform ladder, chainsaw, K-12 mount kit, door for blocking the cabinets, and a Homatro mini cutter, which is a small mini cutter that's very useful for cutting steering wheels and brake pedals and stuff like that inside a motor vehicle. That's a $6,500 item. On our boat, we have to upgrade our lighting system. It's not really bright enough for us at nighttime when we're out there in the water. Then we, for safety reasons, we would like to purchase personal safety flashlights for each personnel, and that will come to a total of around $8,000 when it's all said and done. It says here that our deletions under fire protection was $22,500. That was from last year's budget. Administration, our deletions are $7,500. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but Tammy could probably tell you that. And Building maintenance of $4,100. I believe that's because the remediation of lead in our building has been completed, so it's not an ongoing issue there, so. I think I pretty well covered it all.
Sure did. Yes, Councillor Taylor?
Does the recent announcement of funding by the province affect this budget at all, or that's already spent?
That has nothing to do with our budgets whatsoever, and I will say that we did get $10,000 last year, and that money was used to buy part of our rescue equipment that we bought last year, and the $10,000 actually will come to the town probably within the next week, and then they usually turn it over to us, so we turn around and buy something of special interest that's in the fire department for that. That's what we use it for.
But nothing from this budget?
Nothing from that budget.
Okay.
So next is police, and that's on page 24 of your big budget document. And the slide here highlights the additions and deletions, and Chief Feener is here to go over that.
Good evening, everybody. As the head of finance said, I'm just going to run through the adjusted baseline for 23-24. You'll see the majority of the adjustments come in the form of collective agreement or salary dollars, as well as underneath the police automotive, which is fuel, insurance, etc. It's all combined underneath one heading. If you look at the additions and deletions underneath revenue, we have an addition of $120,000 in police fees for service. That's our third-party checks, as well as increments in our MOUs between Annapolis Royal Police and Kentville Police Service. If you go further down into the expenditures, there's a $19,000 increase into underneath the crime investigation. That covers the constable's salaries. It's a number of topics in that: overtime, court time, stat time, call-out time, etc. So I know 15 of the $19,000 was an increase in overtime. As the fire chief said, the town is getting busier, and we limit the risk when we run with 2 members, so we've been trying to top up shifts periodically, especially during the days and the evenings on the weekends. You go a little further underneath the police automotive, you'll see additions and deletions. Those are basically the maintenance accounts for cars. So as cars come out of service, they remove those maintenance accounts, and then we add new ones for the new vehicles, which are a little less. And then another addition of $30,000 underneath the small equipment. That is an enhancement of our current service delivery to buy a number of pieces of equipment, as well as computer, etc., for the RCMP system to be able to do chemical treatments, serial numbers for firearms restoration, CA chamber for treating exhibits with chemicals, and then being able to do the search ourselves rather than submit them to the RCMP, to have them done on their timeline. With one of our recent hires, we did hire an experienced member and forensic specialist that has that ability. So we are moving towards that to enhance, and with the new negotiations of the service delivery, we're unsure what we may have to pay for those services in the future. That's currently before various levels of the government and municipalities. So that's no real major increases other than, like I said, salary, collective bargaining commitments, as well as fuel, insurance, etc. Other than the additional to the overtime of $15,000 for the constables and $30,000 for equipment, and that is a one-time purchase.
Any questions for Chief Feener? Councillor
Maybe
Thorburn?
one, I'm not sure if I should say it now or later, but under the revenue side on your budget, which the document I'm looking at is on page 27. Fees for police service. I would like to see the criminal records check broke out as a standalone item, same to deed transfer tax, so we can look at a glance and see how much money we're getting for it, instead of being looped in with the other small fees for service. It's a big ticket item. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I think it should be standalone, not group together. That's my one concern. We do show it go into operating reserves under expenses of $200,000, but we don't show it separately on the income side under revenue.
Right, so on page 24 of the town operating capital budget, just make sure I got that. So police fees for services are shown as 500,000 with 120,000 as additions for 620. So you want that broken out into contracts?
I'd like
or-
to see it under that budget, so it's clear to see. That's just me. Maybe it doesn't have to be, but I fought for the deed transfer tax to be broken out too, and we do, and now we can see at a glance and don't have to ask questions.
So, sorry, Councillor Thorburn, so the police fees for service in the document from finance is just third party. That was by mistake. I just corresponded, so the other, like Kentville and Annapolis, are coming underneath other police revenues of 100,000. So we charge Kentville as per, so technically, what's up there for fees of service is what we are making off third-party checks.
So on page 24 of your public budget document,
Yeah.
that
was there.
second row down, that is what you're at, that is the information that you're requesting.
Yeah, it's already broken out there.
Yeah. That was my mistake. I apologize.
All right, good.
There's a number of different line items bunched together to make the document shorter.
It makes it hard when you're doing with two different documents.
Yeah,
You
it
got one on
does.
your screen, then you have to get rid of that in order to get the other one back up. I liked it the other way, but anyway.
And the police budget that was submitted to council for review had more detail. This is
Right.
kind of the
Yeah.
summarized, so our budget document's not 200 pages. But I think council does have that
Okay.
information on expenditures broken down in more detail
Okay, no.
for the police.
Yeah. Any further questions for police? No? Okay. Thank you, Chief Greener.
So engineering services is next, so we'll kind of roll through engineering, water, wastewater, and parks. So that starts on page 28 of your more detailed document, and again, the presentation will highlight for you the additions and deletions to that.
So a little bit of a broken record that's been said so far. So in terms of little speech there, we see engineering and the services associated with the department are heavily impacted by wages, insurance, power, and fuel. So that those are our theme throughout. So I'll focus really on the additions and deletions in the PowerPoint presentation. So in terms of the additional maintenance to the municipal, to the office building, in terms of boiler zone valves and some exterior trim that needs to be repaired. Small additions with respect to janitorial services or peripherals for staff, computers and cell phones. The biggest item in the engineering services budget would be, as council has requested, the winter maintenance route review for this year. We have also backed out $32,000 from the previous year. That either work that's been completed or reintroduced this year, if need be. Let me just flip through the next one here. In terms of public works, which is still within the engineering realm, we broke out our purchase of fencing for our jobs within the road right-of-way or within our parks for safety of our staff as well as the public. We've broken those purchases over a couple of years, so we're purchasing another set of fencing that we will be using for our projects. We're finding we're replacing power tools a little bit quicker and more often. The Public Works Garage, we are trying to improve our security at our garage itself with controlled access to our larger inventory shed, finishing a pipe rack, and then at the same time we're doing St. Philip Street water and main renewals. We're looking at improving our access into the garage rather than that kind of a sweep, it'll be straight in. And then we've, of course, backed out anything we've either completed or for last year as well. Under the transit, most of the additions or deletions really have to do with bus stop improvements. We have completed it 3 or 4 this year with landing pads to delineate the stops better. And then we are improving, I believe, stops 10, 12, and 18 within the operations budget, and then another, we're also doing a bus stop, hopefully a shelter this year near the hospital. For parks and playgrounds, the increase associated with having permanent washrooms at Shipyard's Landing is reflected there, as well as continuing with our signage program at our parks. With that, then some small additions for either new tires for vehicles or new cell phones. We are seeing staff cell phones needing a lot of them being replaced. They're coming due. In terms of wastewater, again, the shifting some of the facility maintenance technicians' time to help with repairs at our lift stations, legal surveys of our pumping station lots. Largest increase has to do with succession planning for our operators and the need for an OIT. And we also are trying another significant one to improve safety on site is having Wi-Fi at our wastewater treatment plant. And I think, oh no, I got more here. Bridgewater Memorial Arena, anything that's not covered within the BMA repairs, the capital projects. So shelving to improve security of our tools that are kept on site, because that place, because the BMA is open at times. So we want to make sure things are locked down there. And an exit door for safety as well. We do have a battery-powered sweeper that's actually portable to all of our facilities. We do need, since the BMA is really active now with both transit and parks and facility staff there, with most of the old arena floor needing to be cleaned, and then any other facilities like Public Works, those floors need to be swept as well, with a lot of the activity there. With respect to the cemetery, all the items are deletions with work that was completed last year. I'm not sure if on the next slide in the presentation or not.
No.
That'll be community development. So just other things just to note, highlighted through, we are seeing some aging assets. So generally I've moderately increased some of our sidewalks, our curbs, our roads through operations. They do need more attention. Outside of that, there's really no changes in at this point with snow removal or bridges or traffic lights at this point, so which is good. And solid waste, really any increases with respect to that are for the collection contracts themselves. And that's all I had. The rest of the comments are with respect to that cap.
Any questions for our Director of Engineering, Councillor Tanner?
Matt, could you speak a little more specifically to roads, sidewalks, and curbs, and what we're investing in them as a potential total?
In terms of the total, it's probably not right at my
Roughly.
fingertips, but what I've seen is this past year, with we're receiving a lot of complaints, I'll be honest, with respect to the condition of our curbs, mainly in the, I'll say the older section of town, request to have them fixed. So while some of those requests may be more aesthetic than they are safety, we're trying to deal with those complaints as quicker than maybe what we've done in the past. And same with really sidewalk condition. While we do assess our sidewalks annually, and then kind of do a quick check-in in the fall, but we are seeing more slips, trips, and falls and complaints on those, so we're trying to address that. And really the road maintenance within the amount of developments that we're seeing, or truck traffic, we're starting to see especially around our intersections. I'll note one, Star Street at King is an area that needs attention. King at Dominion, we're starting to see some of those corners starting to be more. So really it's more to do with the developments or increased traffic or just foot traffic.
So that's on page 28 of your budget document, if you can't find it, but so roads and streets are 115,000, curb maintenance is 45,000, and sidewalk maintenance is 57,350.
So maybe more direct. Are we winning or losing? And how badly are we losing?
We're treading water.
Treading water.
That's about as best I can put it at this point. It certainly would be staff would suggest the more investment in that, but we understand that comes at a cost to maybe other services or other initiatives that we would like to do.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, Councillor Colwell?
For the route review, for snow removal, would that include sidewalks?
Staff have not developed a scope of work. We can certainly, at the time when we do proposal calls, we can provide a scope of work that includes that as an addition, or it could be, or I guess, a provisional item, so to speak, or a part of it. So at this point, I would say we can include it. And normally with these types of proposal calls, and you know, you're looking between 20 to 50,000. I believe we have 50,000 in the budget for that.
Yeah, we did.
So we won't know until we make the call, but it would be looking at everything within the road right-of-way, sidewalks and roads.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to see that as an option. Another question is trail grooming. Is there any thought to expanding that to other areas?
In terms of other
Well,
areas,
I
like
think we're
parks
doing-
or just the trails?
Yeah, parks, for example, yeah.
What I can say is that we have not received any feedback beyond the expectations around trails. I know that we don't often receive compliments in the engineering department or public works, so we have received some. The weather hasn't really been there to do more than what we're already doing now. My concern this year with the fact that we haven't received a lot of snow, I was worried about damaging the trail surface. But I believe we completed it twice, if I remember correctly. So I know that the budget was only based on doing it 5 times to begin with, of plowing and some small portions of snow blowing on the trails. So to do it at parks, it's something we could look at, but I think I would be challenged myself personally whether it would be justified or not, I guess, just with the amount of snow we have.
Okay, Councillor Tanner?
Now, what kind of communication do we have with the province on the status of our bridges?
Not as much probably as we would need. I know that there's one bridge within our capital budgets. It's commonly referred either Vino's Bridge or Walls Bridge. That's the only one that's really on there right now. Beyond that, we've had a little bit of communication with the Veterans Bridge with respect to it's not coming to me. But anyways, just some of the maintenance around the sidewalks that are there. That is our responsibility, but we want to time any of the surface renewals where they're on and off there at the same time they do theirs. And it's escaping me the term. Anyways, the little gap.
Nothing about the old bridge and painting that?
Nothing.
Or nothing?
No. We sent her a recent email with respect to the old bridge, and they had confirmed that they do, I believe, the bridge inspections every 5 years, and it has been recently done. So no, not much.
Anything further for questions? We're good? Thank you. Mr. Davidson, thank you.
So we're on to community development, and that's on page 36 of your detailed budget document in terms of all the budget detail. And again, the slides will give you the additions and deletions.
Okay.
So our department, it's hard to really go through the baseline changes for community development because our department has changed again this year. So it's grown with the moving of the building and fire inspection services, the responsibility for that, from the engineering department over to the community development department. And then again, moving around some of the baselines between building, recreation, and community development or planning. So just to say that we have, our focus is very much on providing support to many of Council's strategic priorities for this year, with development charges and the flood risk study that are both captured under an addition under the special planning initiatives. We've also, just in the past 2 years, added some new permanent positions. They were in the budget before, but the GIS specialist or planning technician was made permanent at last year's budget time, so that's continued to be in our staffing. And then the Planner 1 role was also made permanent earlier on in this year, so just as a reminder, so it looks, our staffing has gone up. And then the fire inspector and the administrative assistant both came over from the engineering department and have been moved over into the community development department. So we're very cozy down on the first floor. And we are supporting, as I said, those council strategic priorities. So you do see in the additions and deletions, and again, I'll focus on those areas for you. Under grants, we have additions of $57,000. So we received in this past fiscal year $52,000 in funding for flood risk studies. So that's 50% funded of approximately $104,000 total, or $100,000 we were estimating. And then we also have a carry forward of $5,000 that we received for placemaking money that's also in those additions. We will always, of course, seek to find additional grants to offset the costs or special projects or whatever we may have. We do have some one-time additions, such as a one-time ArcGIS extension for 2 particular extensions to our existing software that will help support economic development work, as well as our plan review, flood risk, and it's just providing additional abilities within our spatial analysis and mapping to do more flood mapping and things like that. So that will be very helpful. We also have a special project with the pursuit of regional collaboration for building and fire inspection services. That also comes with different, with a change to our permitting software, and also a need to upgrade our records management so that it's digital and easier to transfer between the different municipal units. So that is a special project of $85,000. Again, as I initially said, those 2 special planning initiatives of flood risk and development charges are re-budgeted this year because we didn't get to them last year because of the scope and the amount of work. And we also have a budget increase compared to what we had thought we would need for development charges last year. We also have a small addition of $2,500 for heritage. You will be seeing a report coming to the next council meeting on March 27th to consider. You've already had a first sort of notice of change, but that we would bring forward a policy, an incentive program and policy per budget. So, and then, as I said, we had some placemaking monies that we'd already received, so that continues to be in our budget. We then also looked to see were there places where we could find some cost savings within our budget. So you'll see that there's some reductions as cost saving measures in some places where we thought we could drop down a little bit, as well as we had to return some funding under our active transportation budget because we were unable to complete the project in the location that we had initially applied for. So we will reapply for a different project at a future date. So that is primarily under community development. Then we also have for recreation. So our recreation programming and administration continues to implement Recreation 2.0, we called it. So that shift of creating more opportunities to be active in less structured ways. So we're seeing less revenue from programs as we've been increasing opportunities, often at a low cost or no cost opportunity, sort of more self-directed, things like that. So we're continuing to seek grants, provide ProKids and other opportunities, and the small addition that you see under revenue is that we'll be seeking some revenue to offset. Well, we have a carry forward with a grant that we have received. So those are some plantings under the Community Gardens project. And then we used to charge some money for people to be able to place advertisements in the recreation guide, but last year we changed that rec guide in terms of we're not having as substantial a section, so we're not selling any quarter pages to try to offset that revenue. We reduced the budget altogether, and we're holding to that reduced budget for this year. The big addition is in the grants to organizations. And so I know that that committee met and talked a bit about that at their most recent meeting. And that council had asked staff to consider an ongoing operational funding, annual funding or sort of longer term funding. And so staff have not yet, due to some of the changes in our staffing, we hadn't had a chance to get to that yet, and that's on our list to focus on this coming fiscal year. So we're proposing $15,000 in the 23-24 budget to support the development of an ongoing operational grant that we might provide to organizations that are providing services that council would like to see continue in the community. So examples of that are, Senior Wheels, or now they're called Lunenburg Wheels, Flourish, or the YMCA. Those are the organizations that, this was discussed at council in October when Flourish made a large request of council for ongoing ongoing operating funding. The special rec activities, that addition is grant funded and related to the Active Communities Fund grant that supports our participation in the Municipal Physical Activity Leadership Program. So again, that goes to offset other operating or other projects and ongoing programming. And if we don't receive the grant, then we wouldn't be doing that work. The deletion in the Community Gardens program is related to a grant that we were unsuccessful with, but we'd been very ambitious and had put it in the budget last year, so we didn't receive that. Sorry, I forgot to mention that also on the grants to organizations, that also includes the $15,000 that council had put in this year's budget for the Tiny Shelters grant through the GTO program. And we have not yet funded any applications for tiny shelters, nor received any applications for tiny shelters, so we're suggesting to rebudget that funding for next year, because I think we kind of missed that window of being able to get organizations to be able to get an application to us in time to have a meaningful impact in the cold weather. And just a last comment around the recreation, just in terms of that programming and that shift to sort of Rec 2.0. Some examples of our recent rec work and the type of things that we're proposing in our budget moving forward are more of that welcome and try-it events, increased partnerships that are providing access to people who might not otherwise have access. And that's really to places like HB or LCLC. We've been providing a lot of free swims and free skates through the winter that have been very, very successful. Our equipment loan program, the Storybook Trail, the play boxes, and also like a lot of programming like our scavenger hunts or monthly contests and some new programs that we've been testing out. And what we've been finding is that these types of programs, our focus this year is going to be really on building off of what we have already. And so you'll see when you look at our budget, and our baseline is quite similar. We haven't made a lot of changes, and we're really trying to focus in on what's been successful and providing more of that in more innovative ways through the coming year. Moving on to the pool. Pool season may feel far away with that chilly weather today, but it's fast. It will be here before we know it. So we are looking to continue the partnership with the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center that has provided our lifeguarding services for the past number of years. We have secured, prior to the budget, we didn't know, but prior to submitting the document, we just received confirmation that our title sponsor, O'Regan Subaru, will be returning as the naming sponsor for the pool. So that's great, and we are actively seeking and discussing sponsorship with previous and new sponsors to try to achieve that $20,000 of revenue and sponsorship that we've had in the past. The large increase here relates to an audit that we had of the facility that identified a lot of deferred maintenance, safety, and accessibility deficiencies. I think when we actually totaled it all up, this is about half of what the audit identified in the facility. And so working with the engineering department, we've prioritized about $20,000 that we feel need to be addressed in this year. So we've put the repairs and maintenance, I've identified the main pieces of it. So that includes the replacing the sand media, which needs to be replaced every 5 years. We've received some subsidy from the Lunenburg Queens Recreation Directors Association. I probably got the full name wrong, to do an accessibility audit of the pool this spring, so we would know what we really need to do to support that pool, our pool becoming more accessible. We also need to repair some of the joints in the pool, and we also need to install a ceiling as a safety measure in that pool facility. There is no ceiling, so you could climb up and crawl along. That's been noted for several years as something that needs to be done. So those are the big pieces that we see needing to be done this year, along with a few other miscellaneous items through operations. So again, we have noted some funding opportunities that we are looking at to try to offset that, but we haven't promised anything in the budget at this point. I don't think there's a slide for Energize Bridgewater.
No.
But do you want me to just briefly speak to it or not?
Yeah. We'll just note the page in the budget document that
I think it follows right after community development, but I didn't really have any additions or deletions.
Page 40? Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
page 40.
So it is fully funded, and that's why there's nothing really significant to note in terms of what might impact our bottom line this year. So we have that funding through Smart Cities Challenge, as well as the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency funding. But I just wanted to note that you'll see that there is some additions and deletions in the under Program Governance, Management and Evaluation, and that relates to some proposed positions that aren't and are happening. So we'll be funding a privacy officer position that Tammy had noted earlier, and that's really related to, as part of our Smart Cities Challenge project, we have to do a privacy impact assessment of the work that we're doing, and when we're bringing in the energy management information system and other, we're managing people's personal information and might have data and connected technology, we have to be very careful and clear about how we're managing all of that, and we need to see if we're going to be addressing that, it has to be sort of plugged into a privacy management program that the town has, of which we don't have right now. So bringing in a resource to help the town establish a basic privacy management program that can then protect us as we move forward with our Smart Cities work. That's the main focus of that, and we have removed an investment navigator role and the on-site energy manager role, which came to an end last fall. And the only other piece, just to draw your attention to, is that our baselines in the Energize Bridgewater budget are never really a baseline. They're changing every year based on where we are in the project. So you'll see the numbers are very different for the most part from the year previous, and that's because it's a project that is constantly evolving and changing, and so it was never going to look the same from one year to the next over the 5 years of the project.
Any councillor questions for Councillor Phillip?
Just wondering if you could explain in a little more detail a couple of things, such as implementation of the active transportation plan, so what's happening around active transportation, High Street, Dufferin and trails, and the open space plan, like for park improvements?
Right, so the park improvement plans, and Matt can chime in, have been prioritizing going through all the different parks and identifying areas for improvement, and then the Community Development Department has been working with engineering to sort of then prioritize that. So some of the implementation budget there is, most of it actually shows up in the parks budget versus in the community development budget. Similarly with active transportation, it's a very small budget line that we have for implementing the plan, and the focus of the work has been to date on identifying opportunities and improving that interdepartmental communication for when work is coming up through infrastructure work that's being done, and then bringing in how can we, what's the best practice and what can we then afford and fit within our right-of-way to either retrofit to improve active transportation infrastructure if it's part of our priority areas with the network that was identified in the plan that council endorsed. So with High Street, I do believe it's a multi-use path that is proposed in that section of High, which connects from the Centennial Trail, because that's comes out onto Victoria Road and then comes up to the 3-foot wide sidewalk that then goes along all the way to the community college. So that is the part that is on that. I know with Dufferin Street, I do believe that's some intersection upgrades, and so AT would be taken into account with any intersection and or sidewalk upgrade that might be happening. It doesn't dictate what that looks like, so the plan doesn't dictate that. And so that is all done, that work is carried out through the engineering department in alignment with the council's AT plan.
And in Woodland Gardens, we're looking at some trail improvements.
Yeah.
That's in your capital budget.
Yeah, I think there are 3 parks
Yes,
identified in the capital budget, but it might be that only one park would, depending on whether we're successful with some grant applications to offset the cost of those capital investments, and they're primarily looking at, so the Pinecrest is looking at some equipment replacement. Woodland Gardens, the pathway behind Woodland Gardens is in very rough shape, very narrow, very old pavement, very difficult to wheel or even walk on. And so it's to replace that with a pressure dust level pathway that would go around. And then Winburn Ave has parkland that was dedicated as part of that subdivision but never developed. And so it's proposed to develop something in that neighborhood because the open space plan identified that area as having no park space.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes, Councillor Tanner?
More of a comment, I guess, than a question. So we're encouraging active transportation, we're adding parks and so on, but yet our overall budget is being reduced by about, your overall budget is being reduced by about 25,000. We're not really doing any enhancements to curbs, that's staying flat. And I guess I'm curious how you feel about that. I'm not overly happy about it because I think it's going in the reverse, and then when you look at the pool deficiencies that have just been noted, like, are we going to find ourselves in a year or two saying, wow, we really have all kinds of deficiencies that we now need to scramble and catch up on? And
You mean deficiencies in AT that we would need to scramble in,
just
since we're doing that with
deficiencies
the
in
pool?
pathway, like Centennial
Yeah.
Trail, we pulled back a whack of money, which I assume is maintenance primarily on that.
I have to look to Matt on
Yeah,
that.
sorry, I can.
Centennial Trail, oh, is that related to the, sorry. Can you go back in slides?
I can
So
refresh my memory
that would be
here,
under,
but-
there's parks,
I saw that somewhere.
parks and playgrounds.
Sorry. Yeah, it's in the parks and
okay.
playgrounds.
In the budget document or in the?
Yeah, like
okay.
it's down 15,000, right? We pulled out 15,000, so it's staying flat. All our costs are increasing, we know
I know.
that, but we're pulling out 25 grand overall across the board, which is probably more like, I don't know, let's pick a number, 40,000 given CPI or what have you. So I'm just, I mean,
I think that staff feel the same as you.
Oh, okay.
It's a
All right.
struggle, honestly.
Okay.
It's a struggle. We are looking to find our best pathway forward with the limited resources that we have, and it's a struggle every year. I think I can speak for everybody back here that it's not fun. We wish that we had, you know, a bag full of gold to be able to get to this. We've been trying to get to Generations Active Park since
Right.
it was created in 2011, and we're picking off the pieces that we can as we can afford it. It's really that, you know, we're doing the best we can with what we have, and we're trying to continue to do the hard work of identifying what needs to be done and
Yeah.
making sure that that's in our line of sight, so that when that comes up in a way that perhaps, you know, we have a project where we have to deal with the pipes under the street. So, you know, Audrey's identified and Matt, they've identified what needs to be done, and then we can say, okay, well, is it possible? Can we get enough funding? Sometimes you can't, and
Yeah.
you need to just fix the pipes or the potholes, and you can't get to that stretch of sidewalk that accompanies it or what that might be,
Yeah,
but
I
we're
would-
trying.
I worry that we're biting off more than we can chew with adding more facilities and
Mhm.
more parks and so on. And there's an interesting comment in the survey about you can't be everything to everybody, and stop doing
That's
that,
true.
right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yep.
stop. And it kind of resonated when we talked about clawing back, you know, all these maintenance items and so on, and we're just going to be hurting ourselves 2-3 years down the road. So anyway, just more of a comment than anything. Okay.
It's true, and that's why, you know, we do have 3 park improvements that we put forward in the budget.
Right.
The Parks, Recreation, Culture Advisory Committee spent a delightful 2 hours discussing all of the potential park improvements. And some of them can be low cost with big impact, and or we're looking at things of how can we create more opportunities with less, in a way of, you know, less hard infrastructure that needs a lot of ongoing maintenance.
Right.
adding little things that exist that might just add a bit of fun and or spontaneity as you're moving through a park without having to create something that's going to need a lot of ongoing maintenance. So we are trying to shift. That was part of our Rec 2.0 lens, and that shift from providing large amounts of dedicated, structured, costly programming, or ones that really we might promise a lot and then because we don't have enough uptake we can't do it, and trying to create more self-directed, less infrastructure heavy opportunities.
And you will note that in our options for looking at how to address the deficit, we did kind of look at the fact that some of them we suggested were, for instance, a new park, because it would be, if you look at the cost to maintain that, it's not just the capital, it's the maintenance cost. On the Centennial Trail one, where there's a $15,000 reduction, I believe, Matt's, was some of that a pullback on the frequency of snow clearing and maintenance there from the year before?
Just looking at it, I found that interesting, so I
Yeah.
went through, if there was, we removed some of the one-offs where there was the
Oh.
Does it?
just so used to talking and now we're
Yeah, so looking at your model, looking at some of the comments about some of the specific trail resurfacing, or there was going to be trail pathway signage, things like that, of that nature. And then some of it was just to reflect actuals for the store, as you stated, sorry.
Yeah.
Councillor Thorburn?
Yeah, just to agree with Andrew and the CAO, every time we add something, the maintenance costs continue to go on after the project's completed. And we've done a lot of projects in the last few years, and the maintenance costs have to go up to maintain it, so. It's one thing to build something, but once you build it, you have a responsibility to maintain it to a level that's adequate for service.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Do
museum?
you have a question, Councillor Colwell has a question?
Sorry, I was trying to sneak away.
Could you just reiterate or further explain on the 85,000 for the permit tracking?
Oh, sure.
That was last year's cost.
That's right. So
Carrying forward.
it's, yeah,
Okay.
just to say that was budgeted in last year's budget. We did not expend any of that money this year, so that is a re-budget. Maybe that's a new check mark that we should add next year. It's a re-budget, so, but it's still a new cost for us, because there's, when we move to the regional building and building inspection service, we will need to move up to the same software that the lead agency uses. So the District of Lunenburg has a different version of TownSuite that they use, and we would need to move to that same software so that everything would interact. And that also includes, so there's a cost for software, as well as a cost for scanning all of our records that need to go into what we call our civic files that contain copies of permits and the information that a building inspector would need to have in the field. And then things are driven by a tablet, so they have a tablet, they're in the field, they can pull up documentation, they can do all that, and it will reduce the amount of time we spend moving paper.
Okay, one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the annual funding for community groups, council hasn't decided that we're doing that, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
So why would we put it in the budget?
Because council had asked us to bring forth a proposal for how to fund non-profit organizations that approach council annually, repeatedly, for operational funding, such as the Y, and I think there was Flourish and a few others that so it came out of a grant committee review of applications and recommendation forward to council. So it's just bringing it forward as council directed, and council can decide if they wish to increase the grant funding to accommodate that, because you have 29,000 for grants to nonprofits now, and so this is proposing that this 15,000 would be in addition to that. right? So it can't just be a line item, it's a grant. Whether we budget it as Y funding, it's still a grant, so that's why we're calling it that. So it's really up for council to decide the amount. If you wanted it to be separate from the 29,000 or include it in the 29,000, but the way it was being dealt with was that it was coming out of that $29,000 pot.
So if I could just add to that, we have had I'm just trying to find the number here for you. We have you committed $29,000 in the budget in this past fiscal year and for the past number of fiscal years. The requests continuously exceed the value of the amount of money that we have to disperse. So I know that committee is always facing hard decisions as to how much they can actually support the various grants. And I know that it's double to triple the amount in terms of how much is asked for compared to what we're able to give. So that's why to put something in the budget that would enable council to act on the request to have an ongoing operating sort of category of grants, we had to put more, staff felt we had to put new money in the budget for council to make a decision on, and then that will help guide the committee, the work of the committee, as well as the work of staff.
Just maybe an additional comment, I guess. I think the feeling of the committee, and Mike can obviously chime in, but is that some of these organizations like the YMCA and Flourish are delivering services to the town's different populations of age groups, if you like, that we're just not doing, and it's sort of a supplement that we're giving them to deal with and deliver. So.
I suppose my only question about that is I would even support giving more to community organizations, but I do wonder about when it's operational funding. Mm-hmm. Seems like there's a line there that I'm not sure I'm comfortable crossing or not. So it's the operational piece that I question. And then do we have, so if somebody's coming to us for operational funding, do they give us a business case and explain mm-hmm. how much, like, do they have money and they have no money in order to pay this funding? Or
staff have to develop that protocol. The protocols are what's required to be submitted to council, but normally when a grant application is received, we ask for financial statements and an explanation of need and their organization status, and enough for the committee to say yes. They're not sitting on a pot of money and asking for more money. It's actual money that they need in order to provide the service that they do.
So if I could just add to that, the way staff have been thinking about this and how we would propose to approach it, and I believe some preliminary conversations were had with the committee just last week, that there would be a pretty robust policy amendment to the existing grants to organizations policy. And so it wouldn't just be, we're looking for operational funding, which actually we enable right now. Mm-hmm. And I know has presented some pretty difficult decisions for the grants to organizations committee members. And so it would really refine what operational funding is. It would provide greater clarity on the expectations of what you would provide in that ask to the town for that type of support. So there would be just the $15,000 proposed as an addition in this would, if included in the budget, would then kick off some pretty detailed work from the staff and the Grants to Organizations Committee that would come back to council before any operational grants were sort of applied for and awarded.
Okay, I'd be more comfortable with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald.
So the last one in terms of, I guess, what we wanted to highlight was the museum. And that's on page 44 of your detailed document. And this should be familiar to council, as we did have a couple of discussion sessions with Patrick and Lynette about the museum funding, and you did receive a recommendation from the Museum Commission with respect to this budget, and this is what was being put forth as a recommendation from the Commission. So.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll, again, because council is familiar with the proposed museum budget document already, we'll just walk you quickly through the additions and deletions on both the revenue and the expenditure side. So Council will note that there's an addition of $43,550 in funding from the town this year. We'll get into exactly why that's requested as we go down through this. We also have an addition of $7,400 and change coming for an additional summer student grant through the Young Canada Works program. We are moving over approximately $18,000 from operating reserve to help offset some of our baseline changes. On the deletion side for revenue, because of a focus on the collection remediation that's coming over the next year, we're anticipating a decrease in research fees. The $10,000 for the strategic plan was a one-time grant that we received last year for the Museum Commission to carry out a 5-year strategic vision. So that has taken place and is coming off the books. The grant from the province of Nova Scotia to the tune of almost $19,000 last year was in support of the Community Navigator pilot project. So of course, council is aware that that pilot project has ended, and the Community Navigator has become a full-time post and is moving over to live in the administration budget. And on the art sales side, again, because of the issues with the facility that we're looking at dealing, we're anticipating that there will be a downturn in revenue this year as well. On the expenditure side, we've noted here that there's approximately $27,000, $26,500 associated with salaries and hourly rate changes. So we're not talking about increasing our staffing complement at the museum. The level will stay with a full-time director, full-time engagement coordinator, and a part-time admin role per the direction of council. But just to kind of indicate to folks in the room that, you know, those positions come with costs, with CPI, benefits, and all that stuff, that number goes up, and that it is a significant portion of what council's being asked in terms of an increase this year. The largest increase, which is going to be a one-time shot, is the collection remediation, the conservation project at the museum. As council is aware, we have a mold problem that has been identified in the collection. If it goes unchecked, it threatens the collection, which is the very foundation of the museum. It's the basis upon which we receive provincial funding. So obviously getting that taken care of is a significant priority for this year. Also worth noting on that, we're going to be redirecting a couple of our summer students to work specifically on that project this year. So those folks might have traditionally provided other visitor services or museum-related services during the summer, but we're going to reallocate them and have them focus on that project. We do have some things that are coming off the books on the expenditure side. So there's some money associated with local exhibits. The strategic development grant was noted previously, so that's the Commission's strategic plan. $1,500 is coming off for a Celebrate Canada multicultural event that took place last year. $43,000 is moving out, and that is, of course, all associated with the Community Navigator pilot project last year, too. So again, that's going to live in the admin budget going forward. As part of our reduction and in an effort to get the town's funding to the museum down this year, we're removing almost $10,000 in vacation relief and additional students. So that means that the expectation will be that our complement of staff at the museum find a way to backfill all that without having that extra money spent. And again, just to note regarding art sales through the gift shop, the expenditures that are associated with that process are also coming off the books this year too.
Thank you, Mr. Hurdle. Any questions, Councillor Tanner?
Patrick, with sort of, this isn't the right term, but shutting down sort of portions of the museum, are we also planning to reduce hours? Because there's not that much to see and look at, I guess.
Yeah, no, we're planning on staying, like our areas of the building that are open to the public are going to remain open to the public. So essentially, and it's a great thing for the public to understand, the collection storage is on its own independent air system within the building. So the cleaning that will be taking place will be focused on that space, and we're also looking at using the garage bay as part of our staging area for that process. So the multi-purpose room, the gallery and exhibit areas, all those public-facing areas are going to continue to remain open.
But things like gift shop sales are like way down, projected to be way down. So why, if that's the case, why wouldn't that stay the same, I guess? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's a good question. Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things that has changed in the past 2 years is that the museum staff are no longer handling gift shop sales. The Friends of the Des Brisés Museum have taken over that operation, as well as the costs that go along with it. So we lose the expenditures associated with that. The Friends maintain it, collect the revenue, and then wind up making donations to support the museum and the town.
Got it.
Councillor McDonald?
Just kind of adding to that. Sure. If the public spaces are still usable, why are there no outside exhibits?
Okay, so my understanding is from that's specific to, I believe, the Photograph Club. So we've been working with them to try to figure out ways to get their exhibits into that space. Unfortunately, humidity in the building is a problem still at the moment, so we're looking at bringing in some, I believe they were brought in last year in some cases, some commercial grade dehumidifiers to help take the humidity out of the space. So once we get to a point where that's been achieved, it'll be safe to bring those kind of paper products back in without risk of like the humidity in the air damaging them. So once that happens, again, that number might come back up, but we thought in the interest of budgeting conservatively, in anticipation that, you know, that revenue might not be there this year, that we reflect that in the budget.
Okay. Any further questions? Yep, Councillor McDonald.
The 18,000 being moved from the operating reserve, does that empty that reserve? It says move all operating?
I will
That
defer
leave it
to our
zero?
Director of Finance on that, but I believe the answer might be yes.
So that $18,000 was funding that was received, but not used, so it was sitting in that reserve, and when we were trying to find a way to pay for the remediation and the students and things required, that was one of the opportunities that was identified to assist in funding some of that work.
So then it would leave it at zero?
Yes, but it was only just put in there last year as a result of some additional funding.
Yeah, federal
So,
COVID
yeah.
restart funding, I believe, yeah.
Okay. Any further? Nope. Thank you, Mr. Hurdle.
So Kim's going to go over some reserve information for us and talk a bit about the sewer rate and our debt and capital.
All right, so this just gives you a summary of what's being proposed for the reserve budget. So in your public budget document itself, the operating reserve budget is on page 13, and it gives you more of an idea of the balances in each of the reserves. This is just kind of a summary of what it's being used for, as the ins and outs aren't very detailed on page 13. And so there's expected interest earned of about $100,000 in the reserves, which is great, and we're just maintaining that in an interest reserve. Prior to the implementation of the operating and capital reserve policies, that interest income was just funding town operations. So this permits, I guess the change in those policies permitted the interest to be retained inside the operating and capital reserves. And then council can choose to transfer that additional income to operations if they need it and when chosen, as opposed to the interest income all just automatically being recognized in operations. So with interest rates rising, that's come up because it's been quite low recently. There's the cemetery project funding of $120,000 is a capital project, and that's for the purchase of a new columbarium. And what's happened in the past is we buy them, then we sell particular spaces in that and recover that cost. So what's being proposed is to fund the new purchase using the cemetery reserve, and then as those sell, then we can replenish the reserves so that the monies are there the next time we need to make a purchase, as opposed to debt funding it or funding it of operations. So that surplus is there, it's in the cemetery reserve, and it makes sense to fund that with the anticipation that as sales happen, the monies would go back in that reserve. We are saving for a balloon payment on a debenture when it matures, so each year we put $21,000 in that reserve until that debenture payment comes due. Wastewater, what's happening with that is, as you know, we're suggesting an increase in the sewer rate, and that excess is going in the wastewater reserve fund and allowing us to build up a reserve to pay for capital projects or when emergencies happen, which seem to happen more frequently with regards to our wastewater system. So that includes both operating, but also the betterment charges, which was implemented a little over a year ago. It allows we're also putting that in reserve specifically for I&I projects for development. So the total of those two is $720,000 going in. Right now, what's in the wastewater reserve, we've earmarked $395,000 of that to fund some existing capital projects. We're also budgeting to add another $200,000 to the police reserve through the police budget. There's a number of capital projects being carried forward from 22-23 that were supposed to be funded with operating funds in the budget year we're in right now. So we'll put that money in reserve so that it's there when those capital projects are completed in 23-24. There's a business park expansion reserve, so we're proposing to use $1.6 million of that towards the business park expansion costs in the capital budget. The addition of the wastewater betterment charges going into the budget, and we're only proposing to use $14,000 of that in this year's capital budget. We're using $980,000 from the undesignated operating reserve to fund capital projects. So that is showing there. We're using up some COVID safe restarts, some transit reserves for bus stop improvements that are in the capital and operating budgets of $25,000. With Smart Cities, we receive an allotment from FCM twice a year, and so we were receiving it faster than we're spending it in the past, so we've put it in the Smart Cities reserve, and we're proposing that we will need $496,000 of that to come out of the reserve and back into the Smart Cities project this year. We've talked previously about the special purpose tax reserve and that we anticipate there to be a surplus of about $64,000, so that will go in reserve. And we have some monies we're holding right now under the designated community project fund of $15,000. So we're anticipating those organizations to request grants from the town to then spend those funds in this upcoming year. And so that would reduce the operating reserve balances from 11.9 million, where we anticipated to be at March 31st of this year, to just over 9.2 million at the end of the budget year 23-24. I know that's a lot.
Councillor Tanner?
The police reserve of 200,000. Are you sure it wasn't 250?
No, it's 200,000.
100%?
Yep.
Okay.
It's been the same.
Yeah, I know
it's
it's
been
been
budgeted
the
the
same.
same all along, but
Yeah.
what happens is usually there's even greater than that in a surplus in the police operations. Sorry, we transfer the whole amount.
Yeah. Okay. For some reason I had 250 in my head. Okay.
Hopefully.
Hopefully more.
So next up is the capital reserve. So there's a lot less funds sitting in the capital reserves themselves. If you wanted to look at that, is in the public budget document, page 14. So we're budgeting to use $1.5 million of gas tax funding. We only receive about $675,000 per year, but what's happened is due to some projects being carried over and whatnot, the funding for those is being carried over as well. And in addition to that, we're budgeting to use $250,000 of capital reserves for capital projects that are included in the capital budget. So that kind of, that fund grows and shrinks. We don't budget to put a lot of money in capital reserves. Capital reserves tends to receive its funding from the sale of land or the sale of other capital assets that we're required to put those monies in a capital reserve, and then council has to make a decision to spend those funds. So if we were to look at the budget page 14, you'll see that we're projecting that the capital reserve has $320,000 added to it in 22-23 as a result primarily of land sales activity that's happened during the year. So that has increased the capital fund, the capital reserve fund during the year. We don't budget for that. Those transactions are kind of one-offs, and so the capital reserve balance could end up being higher if there are sales that happen during the year. This one's going to take some explaining.
Councillor Colwell?
Thank you. So the capital reserves, there are guidelines or best practices around the amount that we should have in there. It's a little low, is it not?
So what the province reports on two calculations on reserves. One is the operating reserve, balance, and I think that you're considered low risk if you have at least 20% in that operating reserve. And this is in a later slide, but Tammy's advanced it, so I did on my screen so I could see the numbers. So that 20%, we exceed that. So even with the I think it was $2 million that we project having in the operating reserve at the end of 23-24, that would still have us at 37.9%. So that's pretty significant. The other calculation is actually a combined reserve calculation, so it's operating and capital together, and includes in it not just our expenses but amortization. But because it's combined, the calculation, we still look relatively healthy on that calculation. It's when we look at the capital reserve in isolation that we're projecting to only be at 8.6%. By the capital reserve policy, we'd like to be at 10%. I guess that was kind of our target, but we're not quite there. In fairness, we could have put the Exit 12A Business Park Expansion $1.7 million reserve in this capital reserve and met that ratio. It's really neither here nor there if we put it in operating reserve or if we put it in capital reserve, from my perspective. But had we put it in capital reserve and we needed some of it for operating, we then can't use it to fund an operating expenditure. Capital reserve is restricted for debt repayments and capital projects, essentially. So it's a less flexible reserve from that perspective. So we could put the police reserve there. We could balance it out if we felt that it was really a significant driver of our health. But overall, we know combined the percentage is there. It's just how we choose to allocate a specific reserve between operating and capital. So if that helps. So when we see the little house that the province does all the calculations, you know, our reserve balances are healthy. They don't do one specifically on the capital reserve. So it's not, capital's not maybe where it should be, but combined, I think we're still okay, knowing that there's some money in operating reserve that could go in either category.
Okay, Councillor Conklin?
Any idea what kind of rate of return we're receiving on our reserve balances, cash balances?
So it's based on our RFP that we had done for banking services, so that's under contract, and it would be prime plus a percentage that I don't know off the top of my head. It was actually higher than GIC rates had been, so it's a good rate of return. We know that the province just approved our investment policy, so we intend to, during 23-24, get an investment RFP out so that we can have an investment advisor who follows the policy and invests those funds while maintaining that capital security that council would want. So our intention is to go that route, but right now we're just under our banking RFP and rates of return.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
If I recall, with our RFP, I think that there was a clause in that excluded investment opportunities, funds for investment.
Right, so we have the ability to do GICs with our banking RFP, but it is fairly limited, and inquiries both within our financial institution and others, the rate we were earning on our savings accounts was higher than we could get on GICs. And because it moves with prime, it's been okay.
No, I'd be interested to know what the rate is, because I know at with the NJSB, with the account they have at one of the banks in town, that they're getting, it's a prime minus 1.4, I think, which is over 5% now, and we've benefited very well with the NJSB on the rate of interest over the last 10 months, 12 months.
No, I know how much money, calculator's not working, right? Yeah, We're definitely not that high. I just know how much money we got on one of our savings account when I was looking at bank reconciliation today. So we're definitely not in the 5% range, but it was significantly higher than still what we could get on a GIC. And that's what the investment policy will permit us to do. And so without locking anything in until we get that investment policy out, or investment RFP out, that's kind of where we're at.
Thanks.
All right. So the next topic is, sorry, I just have to back up on my screen, is a bit more complicated. So as council knows, even prior to 3 years ago when I arrived, council had been looking at ways to have sewer become fully funded through the sewer rate and on a user pay system where those who use the system should be paying fairly for that. And so as part of that, we've investigated using water consumption as an estimate of sewer use. Unfortunately, we've came up with a number of roadblocks in that. Some of that is related to our accounting software, some of it's related to water meters and various other things. And so staff sat down and reviewed our current process, which is a flat rate. And there's a flat rate for residential with a first unit rate and then an amount per additional unit. The same with commercial. There's a separate category for hospitals and a separate category for hotels. And the commercial and other all fall under kind of one big category. So one of the things that we noted was that if you have, say, a duplex, and you have one first unit charge and the other second unit charge, that second unit's only paying 38% of the first unit charge, when there may not actually be a discrepancy in their contribution to the sewer. So you'll see in the proposed that for 22-23, the first unit of residential was $487. Any additional units to that were only $185 each. And so we're suggesting that increase about 20% to that second unit to $297 to get that second unit rate up closer to what a primary, that first base charge would be, as we don't really envision those additional units actually using the sewer less. And so that discount for additional units doesn't seem to fit council's direction for having a user pay system and having people pay for their usage. So in lieu of being able to deal with it on a consumption basis right now, we've dealt with the additional unit charge on residential and commercial by increasing those with a plan to increase them over the next few years, but kind of getting at that this year as a starting point.
Councillor Conklin?
Have we considered increasing that additional rate even more? Because really, in a duplex scenario, that second unit could possibly even drive more sewer than the primary unit.
We know, but to go from $185 to potentially moving it closer to $500 felt like it might be a bit aggressive. But that's really, what staff have looked at to start implementing a change, and if council would rather have a different approach to that, that's fine. So essentially what we did was try to balance the increase with an increase for the regular residential users. So instead of going 20% across the board to all the different rates, which is the approach we've had the past several years, we said let's keep the first unit to 6 or 7% for residential and commercial, and let's really kind of deal with the bigger increases to those additional units. It could be not just a duplex, but it could be multi-unit residential, land lease communities. There's a number of different applications where they would be receiving that additional unit discount.
And you're looking at phasing, as staff are proposing that you would phase that increase to those additional units. What was it, 2015, 15, 10 or something thereabouts, over the next several years as opposed to one big hit.
Yeah, we know we need the sewer rate trend overall needs to go up by 20% for the next couple of years and then eventually 15%. And so as part of that kind of overall plan, we hope to address it, a lot of it through these additional units, potentially. Right now, the sewer bylaw only gives us the 4 categories, the residential and land use communities as one, hotels, hospitals, and then a third kind of that captures everything else. So the intent is that over the next year, staff would have time to review that bylaw and make recommendations to add categories so that we could better partition categories that may be higher users that are kind of lumped in that one big category at the bottom that we can't really address. So the other one, just really to note, would be the hospital. So the hospital also has a base charge, which was equal to 1 commercial unit, plus an additional charge per hospital bed. And so to get at the main part being that the $1,000 commercial rate being the primary amount, we are actually suggesting that that first base charge go up significantly this year, but also that would continue to increase because the hospital beds likely isn't the driver of the wastewater usage of that facility. So we are trying to address the ones we know. That third category or that fourth category doesn't allow us to get at all of them, but hospitals and hotels specifically, and the additional units for residential and commercial that you'll see here highlighted in blue were the ones that we were kind of targeting to get closer to that actual consumption.
Councillor Turner?
Have we compared ourselves to other municipal units in that regard? Like what they're charging hospitals for their usage? Is that,
No, not specifically.
We can.
could we just
we can.
push
Yeah.
that on much more?
It's really hard. Everybody
curious.
charges sewer so differently.
Yeah.
Some
I
do
know.
it based on consumption.
Yeah.
Some do it
Some it's
on a
part of
flat
their
rate,
rate.
but it's not. They're not recovering their tax rate supplementing as
Yeah.
ours had been previously and kind of still is a bit.
Yeah.
So it's really, we can compare, but it's really complicated because even in kind of reviewing who does consumption based and is it on the tax bill or not, the variety throughout the province is pretty significant, and some may not even have a separate sewer rate that we can pull out.
It sounds selfish, but, you know, and healthcare is in a big state, and I don't want to put any more pressure on it, but at the same time, our sewer system's in a state, and it seems like that the hospital's getting an incredible deal given the size of that facility and probably what it's pushing through the system, so anyway. Okay.
Councillor Thorburn?
Yeah, I'm looking down to that, and I kind of agree with Copeland in a way that everybody should be paying the same amount. If you've got a duplex, why should the person on one side be paying a higher rate and the other person a low rate? And maybe if everybody was changed and it's 5,025 units, if we was all paying a higher price, maybe we could get back to neutral fairly quick. And then maybe at the end of the day, we'd all get a break. And the other thing that really bothers me, we got municipal sewers and municipal commercial sewers that are getting away cheaper than our residential sewers. You know, residential sewer is only, $6.24, going up 7%. And your commercial sewer is going up 7%, but in town, commercial sewers additional are going up 40%.
We do have an agreement with those.
Well, I think that agreement should be looked after. They should be paying a fair share.
Yeah, we can review that agreement. The agreement doesn't necessarily indicate one way or another regarding increases. I think we've just sent letters notifying of increase, so it's certainly an option that we can.
I'm just looking at fairness to our own residents, that would get increased 40% where somebody outside of town gets increased 7%.
So we don't charge for additional sewer connection, we just have the base sewer connection, right? So every sewer connection is 1,325 outside of town.
You know, we only have 18, then I'm talking about the residential ones, are doing the same thing.
Yeah, residential is 624 for every unit.
62 of them.
Pardon me, for 62,
Yeah.
for 62 connections, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we do charge more for outside than inside.
Well, I know, but I mean, the rate of increase is 40% in town and 7% outside of town. If you look at those numbers.
40% for the additional sewers inside town, right? So it's 7% for the commercial sewer rate. So it's the same percentage increase for commercial, and the residential is actually 0.9% higher outside of town.
A little bit. but I
A little
mean,
bit, yeah.
But I'd like to see those up as well.
Councillor Conklin?
Okay, so just curious, additional residential sewer, so it's about, prior to the proposed rates, 38% of the basic rate for the additional. On the commercial side, it was 51. Now we're going for 60% for additional residential as a percentage of the basic, and commercial is actually going to drop a bit, 40%. I guess what was the thinking there? Because basically we kind of just flipped around the.
Sorry. There's a lot of numbers on there, so I should have probably hit some columns. So the first column is percent of the base rate, and the column to the very far right is the revised. The one in the middle is just the percentage increase in the rate, so there's kind of three different numbers there. So
Gotcha.
I think that probably is going to help you in that the additional commercial sewer is going from 51% of the first unit rate to 67%.
Yeah.
And it's really just permitting us to kind of get that over a few years.
Yeah, no, I could appreciate that, but I don't know. I like the idea of, I'm not sure how many municipalities have such a deal for the additional residential sewer rate, but like you said, it's hard to tell because I think the majority of them are metered, they're on consumption, based on consumption.
Some are not. Yeah.
It's all over the board.
It is a bit. There's less consumption based because most don't have the ability. A lot are just on the tax bill, so it's a flat rate, or it's included in their rate per se.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. So again, we're happy to revisit that, but that was kind of, we knew we needed to get a 20% overall increase, and that was kind of the approach. To get there while also gives us the ability to let residents anticipate those increases over the next few years that are affected by those multi-unit rates. So the next thing in the slides, Tammy wants to click us to the next one.
I didn't mind that one. Sorry.
All right, perfect. We presented the capital budget at the January 30th meeting, and so this is just kind of a summary of that 10-year capital budget. There's a couple of things that have changed since that January 30th budget, but they are limited to a few different things. Included in the budget for 23-24 originally was work on Dufferin Street. And so we had included both the design work and the actual paving and crosswalk all in the same year. But prior to this meeting, we caught that and moved out the construction work to 24-25. So it's still there. We just know we're not likely to get the design work and the construction all in the same season. So that's been moved out to more accurately reflect timing. In addition to that, the energy management projects, there was a couple in the 23-24 budget that got moved out 1 year while we work on the plan for staffing positions or how the work will get done. And then in addition, there was only a couple other changes because we weren't going to be getting the Dufferin Street crosswalk done. One was added to Hurdle Drive, a project at the Hurdle Drive intersection for pedestrian crossing. And we increased two different budget items, the police radios and the 5-ton truck, by $25,000 each, given more additional information that was received on pricing. So those few changes, but for the most part, everything else has stayed the same at this point in time. And it gives you an idea, I think Tammy mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation, we have about $8.9 million in capital projects carrying forward from 22-23 into the next fiscal year, largely made up of projects such as Pump Station 11, that's in progress, which is a $7 million project on its own, and exit 12A, which is over $8 million. So when you exclude those projects, the carry forward list dollar-wise is much smaller. And in addition to that, we have $15.1 million proposed for 23-24. We're not going to review that capital budget in detail because it was already presented once. And so we'll kind of go through some of the additional slides. So we always like to provide council with where we are with respect to debt and the 10-year capital plan. So you'll see from this graph that in 25-26 we reached the 15% debt service ratio that we'd like to try to avoid, but the reality is with the capital budget as it is, we're going to likely get there in 25-26 based on the debt affordability model that we use. Now the reality is every year we have capital projects that carry over year over year, so we might buy ourselves a little bit of grace just in timing of when the projects are finished and how quick we finance them. But based on the 10-year capital project, you know, in the years 9 and 10, we're definitely in the 19% debt service ratio range. On the next slide, we're just show you the debt servicing costs, not as a percentage, but in actual dollars. So you can see in years 9 and 10 again that our actual debt servicing costs is in the range of $5 million at that point in time. So that means that we have debt, principal, and interest payments of that amount in those years to repay for the projects that we're doing over that 10-year time frame. So just kind of, instead of just showing you in percentage, it gives you that in dollars. Those graphs are also in your public budget document as well to refer to. So this is just a summary of the $15 million in this year's capital budget, how it's being funded. So as we saw earlier, about $1.1 million is being funded through the tax rate. $675,000 is being funded with gas tax, and we have grants either confirmed or not in some cases of $3.4 million. However, any of the projects funded with grants that are not confirmed, those projects would only be completed once grant confirmation is received. A small amount from capital reserve of $150,000, $1.5 million from operating reserve, and the remainder being $8.2 million being financed through debt.
We already did that one.
And we've already been through this one, just kind of an idea of where our reserves will stand.
Tammy, before we move, can we go back to slide 33 with the projected debt ratios?
The ratios or the amounts?
No, either or, doesn't
Okay.
really matter. I just want to verify or confirm what grant money are we showing in those years, because this year we've got, I think it's 3.4 in grants that we
Yeah.
know of. But in a future budget year, how much is in it? Is it just a gas tax reserve fund in there with no other grant money?
No, there is an expectation, I guess, of some grant money for each year. They may or may not be confirmed.
Okay.
But
Do we know what that amount is?
It's estimated on an annual basis, but we don't have a set amount.
Yeah, so we've made some applications for funding for wastewater projects. Of course, those are still outstanding at this point, so we can't say that we have funding or don't, but we're planning as if we'll have that funding. So those are shown in each fiscal year as the amounts, there's a couple million a year.
Yeah. So
If we don't realize that, then we'll have to look at scaling back those projects or funding it in other ways.
And on the other side of the coin, theoretically, if we get that money, then our projected debt service cost should come down.
No, those numbers are built into this. So the debt service ratios that you see there have that funding assumption in there, that
Oh, okay.
grant assumption in there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure, I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
All right, no, cool.
Okay. So, as we indicated to council at the beginning of the presentation, we prepared the budget with the tax rate remaining at the same as last year. with everything that you've seen in the budget, with your strategic initiatives, your capital projects, and just the increased cost of operations, that results in a deficit of $589,000 and $590,000. And as indicated, we are not able to budget with a deficit. So we have to look at balancing our budget or planning to balance that. There's the options to address that are to increase your revenue or decrease your expenses or a combination of both. So we are going to present some of that to you. We would note that, I mean, you're kind of looking at tax rate options. 1 cent for both residential and commercial equals $83,000. So every time you cut something and it's $83,000, that's a cent. If you want to add revenue, 1 cent is $83,000, and there's $590,000 of deficit to consider. When you're looking at the tax rate that you may wish to have to support that, one of the things you may wish to consider is looking at a tax rate stabilization. So as opposed to the yo-yo, looking at stabilizing that and providing some predictability in that. And it's important to kind of look out into your future years as well to see what you need to sustain not only this year but future years as well, and how you can plan to avoid the peaks that come and the impact of those peaks on a yearly basis. So you can see that in this, the 3-year, and we'll show you the 10-year, the 3-year view of your budget. The first column is status quo with a 20% sewer rate increase. So status quo means that your residential and your commercial tax rates remain the same as the current fiscal year we're in. And as you can see, the deficit's there. And then it's larger the next year and the next year after that. So it's clearly, and there's some conservative assumptions built into this model that Kim will describe for you about assessment growth and assuming that there's still going to be a little bit more of an aggressive growth next year, and then it's going to kind of go back to the 2%, but for this year, next year, it's a bit higher. What does 5 cents, if you were to look at a 5-cent tax rate increase and a reduction of cost to match that to bring it down to 0, what would 5 cents give you? You would have to, you'd be in a deficit position without reducing expenses, so you'd have to cut 181, and you can see that in the following years you'd be in the same position, that you'd be looking to reduce expenses. So 5 cents wouldn't sustain that, or every year you'd have to be prepared to do that dig and look for reductions. If you looked at an 8-cent tax rate increase, then you're obviously that will cover your expenses for this year, and it's projected for next, assuming no big surprises. But then in the 3rd year, you're in a deficit position again. And 10 cents will sustain you for those 3 years. And one of the things to look at is more of a longer term picture of that as well, to show you just knowing our debt servicing costs, like Kim indicated, we're going from 1.2 million or 1.3 million to 2 million to 3 million to so it's going up every year. So those are new costs being introduced into your operating budget, right? So that all those things are built into this model to show you kind of what the 10-year picture looks like. And so this just kind of blows that out and says, you know, clearly status quo is definitely not going to be sustainable as we move out into the fiscal years. 5 cents isn't either, and then we kind of show what 8 and 10 cents look like as well, without some significant reductions in your service levels and what you offer to your residents. Those are, of course, your options as well. Anything you wanted to say with respect to the model, Kim?
Just a couple of things. So just because council might be concerned about the assumptions behind it, because of course it's a model provided us by Municipal Finance Corporation, so you know, every time we change 1%, it moves the whole model around. But we've assumed for 23, 24, we kind of know what our residential and commercial growth are. But we anticipate that that's going to start decreasing. So we're anticipating in 24, 25, perhaps a 5% increase, and then in the years after that, only a 2% increase, which would be more in line with what we've previously seen prior to 2020, and then about a 1% increase in commercial assessment, where that one's a little more volatile, and we've actually seen it be negative or close to zero in the past, even on the commercial assessment growth. We're assuming about 1%. In addition, we're assuming that long-term debt interest rates don't swing significantly and they stay similar to where they are currently. And as well, CPI calms down so that salary increases based on CPI are no longer increasing greater than 2% as well. So those are unfortunately some big assumptions to make, especially around, things around fuel and insurance, which have been pretty significant. As of late, we also assume those increases will level out in the future as well.
This is the one where we always hope that those increases will make your debt service ratio look better, and it
Yeah, so one would think if we had a higher tax rate that it would make this look better, but because the cost of the debt service is a percentage of your revenue, even a 5 cents, which is at $83,000 a cent, it's not overly impactful to that ratio. So going from in 25, 26, for example, going to a 10-cent increase changes the debt service ratio from 15.79 to 15.22. So in most cases, it's not improving that, and more grants and borrowing less is really the key to keeping that somewhat under control, combined with revenue perhaps. All right, so for this one, I just kind of wanted to actually quantify what an increase in the tax rate and sewer rates mean to our residents. And so I started with, in 22-23, the average taxable assessed value of a property in town was $165,411. So in the year we're in right now, in 22-23, that person's property, that average property had a cap on it, so it was only taxed at $158,000. So the residential taxes were $2,767, plus the special purpose tax at 6 cents, and our sewer rate at $487. In 22-23, they would have paid $3,350 in taxes. I took that same property and assumed the 7.7% increase in cap. So that's what any property that is capped had for an increase this year, which brings that property to $170,310 of taxable value, and assumed the tax rate's the same, the special purpose tax is the same, and with the 6.1% increase in the sewer rate, they are now paying in 23-24 $3,600. So that increase of $250 is a combination of a little bit of sewer rate, but also just the increase in their assessment, increase that by $250. So then, just so you could kind of quantify the previous slides, I just went right to the 10 cents because we can assume 5 and 8 cents would be somewhere in the middle. That if we were to have a 10-cent increase in the residential tax rate and the sewer rate was still increasing, their tax bill from 22-23 to 23-24 would increase by $420. Just kind of gives you the ability to kind of see that increase. And then I just took, assumed the property in 22-23 had a taxable value of $300,000. Again, increased it by the cap 7.7%, and applied a 10-cent tax increase. So you can see that tax rate staying the same, their increase is $448, or an increase in the tax rate would result in 771 additional tax dollars for the fiscal year 23-24.
So that's looking at what will a revenue increase, if you just kind of totally went to revenue, what would that look like, right? And one of the things again to remember is that when we're looking at rates, we can look at it year by year and, as I say, find cuts to get you to that number. The next year, you're going to be doing the same thing again and again. So the message in that particular slide is the existing rate's not sustainable given your priorities and your infrastructure investments. The rate you choose will kind of influence how much you're going in to look for reductions in service every year to sustain you. So some of the things we looked at was, okay, well, if, understanding that, some of this isn't always that attractive, what could be some of the expenditure options to address the budget deficit as well? So there were a number of additions that were proposed in the budget that we provided them to you with the required or not required check mark by them, so you would kind of know that there's nothing that says that you have to do these things, or things that you've identified that are things that will help progress the organization in the town and meet some of your objectives. But you can always defer, or you can not do. So some of the things that we identified that could be possibilities, and again, they're just suggestions. You may have your own thoughts about what those could be. And of course, there's always the capital budget that can be delved into as well. Understanding that the impact would only be if it's funded from operations, or we pulled something that was funded from operating reserve and used that money to fund something else that was funded from operations. So when we're looking at the operating budget, one such thing is asset management. It's been identified as something that's good for organizational excellence, for moving the organization forward, for helping with budget, doing that life cycle costing piece. It's something that the federal government has said provinces need to work with municipalities to move them forward in asset management, and that was something that was identified through, I keep calling it the gas tax agreement, but it's got a new name now that always escapes me, but it's a funding agreement. And Nova Scotia's position is that municipalities need to be moving towards that, but there's no drop dead date. Some provinces have drop dead dates. There's nothing that says we have to have it done by a certain date. So that's certainly an option. And if you even looked at just asset management, I think it goes down to small equipment and office. The total cost of that's $127,000. So there's one option there. There's funding also provided for recruitment and retention strategies of $20,000, the BRE of $10,000. There's small equipment, so there's the battery powered sweeper, which was a tool that was introduced for more, we don't have one now, but it's more for custodial work and making that more efficient. There's the winter maintenance review of $50,000. There's budget software of $25,000, and internal controls could be postponed of $25,000. The heritage grant's really small, but there's that option. Grants to committees, there's $30,000 there, so there's the tiny shelter grant, as well as the operational grants for organizations. Under capital, there's the GAP. The GAP keeps getting moved out, but next year we're only doing design. So there's no construction. So you can look at that and say, this is an example of once you develop it, you're going to have to maintain that and operate that. But there's $40,000 there. As I mentioned to you, we looked at some of the parks and said, well, some of it's new, like the Windburn, so maybe that's an option to pull that out. That's $10,000. And Pinecrest Playground of $16,000. Pavement renewal, you have, I believe it's $600,000 in the budget, or $620 in the budget. So then you could look at reducing that. So that's an option that would have a direct impact because that's funded from operations. Pearl Street paving, that's funded from the operating reserve, but you could remove that project and use that reserve to fund another capital project that we're funding from operations to reduce the amount. The goal is to reduce the amount that we're funding from operations. The police portable radios, you could look at using the reserve for that as opposed to the operating. The last one is just to kind of note that that one's been moved out a year, and we will try to look at using some of that gas tax if the project's eligible to fund something out of operations. But those are some options for you if you want to look, if you're feeling like you need to look at both revenue and expenses, or just expenses in itself. Those are some options that are provided to you as suggestions. As I said, when you go into your capital budget, it's really about projects funded from operations or reserves. Anything else you pull isn't going to impact the operating budget and that deficit. So, that brings us to next steps. Like certainly if council wishes to start that deliberations tonight, you can do that. If there's more information you feel you need to help you have those conversations, then we can provide that to you as well, with some direction as to what you feel that is. Your next scheduled meeting is March 27th, and at that meeting, the intent would be to get some direction on changes. You have your talk Bridgewater on March 28th, and then April 11th is kind of the target for when we bring back a final budget document for final consideration and approval.
Yeah, just opening up for thoughts on, as our CEO said, about any direction this evening, or do you want to feel that to wait till the next meeting? Councillor Thorburn?
Did we do wastewater tonight? I don't remember all
Yeah.
of them.
Matt did it. Matt covered it.
Matt talked on some of it? Yeah. I seen her setting up there. I'm used to her coming down with a low voice.
No, we did do wastewater, and wastewater is funded through the sewer rate as well.
Yeah.
So any changes there, well, if you're looking at, if you're just down to the options piece, it wouldn't address the deficit.
Any further questions? Councillor
Can
Tanner?
you refresh my memory on what the GAP conceptual plan is?
So with that conceptual,
What it delivers?
yeah, that is to look at the remainder of the design for the GAP Generations Active Park. So there was splash pad, I think tennis, trail development that we were looking at doing a design for, so that then we could go to construction in a future year.
Basketball courts and stuff there too.
Yeah, it was all part of a phased plan.
Any
yeah.
pickleball?
There was talk about it, maybe.
Never.
Just a question, if I can, on the Pearl Street paving, sorry. I guess I wonder if our Director of Engineering would be able to know if that would be based on the treehouse development. Is that, I know it's in the budget now, but is that realistic to be able to, in the timeline with the completion of treehouse? I know it's still ongoing.
So I believe the Pearl Street paving was a council request that was deferred from last year, correct?
Yep.
And we put off because of the development. I understand that the development is looking for occupancy sooner rather than later.
Okay, they're moving
They are
along.
dealing with their services. There are some service issues they need to deal with, but, crystal balling when they're actually going to start being
Okay.
in there, I'm not sure at this point.
Okay.
But certainly, that is an option that staff have reviewed for a potential cut for this year.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Matt, just on the Pearl Street, in terms of, it's to pave the gravelled area, is that correct?
Yeah, so just, I walk that area, it's probably one area I walk a lot, but yeah, it's just as soon as you crest the hill,
Yep.
going towards MODL's portion, that would be the gravel that we would be looking at. So some moderate ditching that needs to be done, excuse me, likely some surface gravels would need to be added, and then paving itself. So staff have reviewed the estimate from previous years, and it seems to be in the right ballpark.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thorburn?
While you're up there, while if we're going up, then we're gonna gravel it. I think our town services stop with out at the top of the hill.
I understand that, yes, correct. There
So
will
we
be,
won't be going to our line, we'll just be going, because our services was bottom, so.
yeah, we're not adding, asking.
We're
if
not
adding-
extending it.
No, we're not.
Want to be clear.
So just looking for any further comments from councillors as to, do we feel comfortable tonight or want to wait till the next council meeting as to sort of have some more discussion or maybe feedback from Talk Bridgewater, I don't know, just sort of keeping in mind that we meet again next Monday evening, and staff will be looking for direction as to our options that were presented this evening as to which way to kind of go to finalize the budget. So are we going to leave with open minds and sort of look at the options and take into consideration Talk Bridgewater? Councillor McDonald?
I'd like the week to kind of mull things over.
Okay.
Email with any extra questions I might have, and the Talk Bridgewater
Okay,
as well.
so again, if you leave tonight and you have questions, I guess you can email our CAO or Director Kim Hopkins can help. Maybe CC the rest of us, just that way we're not duplicating the same questions. Any further?
Just point out, I think Talk Bridgewater is after the next meeting.
Oh.
After
Oh,
March
it's the 28th.
27th.
Oh, I didn't realize, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, good point, sorry.
I'm fine with waiting
Okay.
for next meeting.
All
to
right,
get direction.
and like I said, if you have questions, feel free to email those through to the CAO or our Director of Finance, okay? Do you have any further things before we wrap up? No? Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Conklin, seconder. Councillor Cobal. Okay, thank you. Call the meeting to adjourn.